Hello everyone, welcome to the Psychology of Dating podcast. You're listening to Nadine Newkirk. I'm a clinical psychologist and a dating coach. If you're a regular listener, you might have noticed that I've been on a bit of a break from doing the podcast, and I've actually had a very busy September. I've had 2 weddings, both still in Australia, but destinations, driving 5 hours different directions, which were really, really fun. And also I've been to Tasmania. And for anyone who hasn't been there, Tassie is great. It's reminds me of almost a little New Zealand. It feels like another country. Nature's beautiful, really spacious, easy to get around. People are friendly. We had this amazing hot smoked salmon bagel. And the sauces and the pickled onions and everything on top. It was the best bagel I've had in my life. So, had a little bit of break, but I'm also excited to get back into the podcasts. I've had a few ideas percolating in my head of what to talk about. I recently did a talk for UNSW for their college students. So there's a month, I think, called Sextember, where they did all different types of talks on consent. They did workshops, they got guest speakers in, and I did a 10-minute talk on dating tips and was on a panel with 2 other guest speakers. And we got some really interesting questions from the college students. So I'm really excited to share an episode with you later on that, what the questions were and how I answered them. But for today's topic, I'm going to talk about how to spot signs of narcissism in someone that you're dating, and signs that you might notice in them and symptoms for yourself as well. I think this is really important because there's lots of different people we can come across, and there's, varying degrees of emotional immaturity. And if it's really on the severe spectrum, or someone has significant narcissism where there's impacts in empathy, that this can be really detrimental to your mental health and really impact how you view and go along in dating. This topic was actually requested by a listener of the podcast. If you have any questions or topics that you'd love to hear, feel free to drop me a line at my website on the contacts page. So I'll put a link to that in the episode show notes. You just go to nadineNewkirk.com and go to contacts, and then there's a form where you can request an inquiry and just fill in there what your question is or what theme you'd love to hear about. So how might you be able to tell if someone you're dating or have dated in the past might have some signs of narcissism? What can you notice in yourself and in them? And it's important to remember first that anyone can attract anyone. So there's no shame if you might have come across someone who has narcissism, or where you felt like you weren't treated so well, that anyone, regardless of age, regardless of gender, anyone can attract anyone. It's not something's wrong with you. It's just that there's a whole pool of people out there in the world, and, statistical chances we come across different people. So the first sign of narcissism I want to talk about is a lack of empathy, or inability to empathize with other people's feelings and needs. So an example of this might be you're dating someone and you trip over, and their first response is to say, I told you shouldn't have walked over the rock that way. They go straight to criticism or belittling, putting themselves above you, making themselves feel superior, rather than focusing on your emotional needs. So it can be hard for someone, and we're talking about narcissism on a scale as well. So we all have a little bit of narcissism. It's actually helpful and adaptive to have that self-love, to be able to care and focus on yourself above others at times. This can be actually really adaptive. With someone higher on the spectrum of narcissism, there's inner feelings of insecurity or doubt or shame, but that's masked with this excessive overconfidence and needing validation from other people to feel okay, that People with narcissism can actually on the inside feel quite low or depressed, but there's an exterior of putting themselves above others, saying, I'm superior, the way they say comments or belittle people. It can really make you feel like you're less than, that they know more than you. And if we think about the example where someone trips over a rock, what you're really needing emotionally in that moment is comfort, validation, reassurance. Reassurance. Oh, I've tripped over rocks like that before. I just did it the other day. Comfort. Are you okay? A hug. See if you need a Band-Aid or anything. And emotional validation. Oh, I would be upset too. Ow, that must have hurt. Really be able to step inside and see your world and see it from your perspective. When someone has narcissism, it's hard to see outside their own world. That people around them are more, you can think about it like extensions of them. So if you're doing an activity that they love and the way that they like doing it, things can be going smoothly. But as soon as you're your separate person and you have a different opinion or you want to do things differently, then you can experience what's called narcissism wrath, where you could get, anger outbursts, you could get criticisms towards you. So we've got lack of empathy, self-focused. Another sign of narcissism can be rigid mindset. So this is thinking it's my way or the highway and not actually being able to see that compromise. So if you're dating someone and maybe you don't like how often you're texting, you'd prefer more texts or less texts. And when you say this to the person, they're like, oh, what's wrong with you? You're always making a mountain out of a molehill. You should want to text me more. Or, you're too needy. You're asking for too much. So instead of coming with rather than a rigid mindset, a growth mindset where they say, okay, I see you see it that way. I actually feel stressed when I get too many messages. How can we figure it out together so we can both feel comfortable? There isn't that ability to see your needs and your side of the experience. It's like they feel attacked and suddenly you're thinking, oh, why did I bring this up? Maybe my feelings don't make sense. If you are guessing your feelings or feeling like you're walking on eggshells, doubting that your emotions are valid, those can all be signs that you might be dating someone with narcissistic features. You also might be feeling quite anxious. And this makes sense, right? If you're around someone where they are unpredictable because they can't really read the subtle emotional cues, have that ability to empathize, see things from your perspective, and they might be more critical, lashing out, put downs, it's normal survival instinct to be more on alert. So if you're getting anxiety, that's your body saying, hey, there's a threat here and we need to survive this, and it's switching on those survival modes. So if you're feeling a lot of uncomfortable emotions or anxiety, maybe they're nice sometimes but not others, and you never really quite know what you're going to get that day, signs of anxiety, that can also be a symptom of being around someone with narcissism. Another symptom of narcissism can be shifting the blame or gaslighting. So maybe there's a situation where it's really clear that the person you're dating needs to take responsibility. Maybe they've abused the trust in the relationship and they've been unfaithful, they've cheated. And you're confronting them about this, that you're upset, that you're angry, natural emotions when there's been a lack of trust in the relationship. And somehow the conversation, the argument have shifted around and they're talking about, you never cared for me, you're not affectionate, you're, a terrible person in this, and this way. And you're suddenly starting to feel confused or guilty. And it's really hard to see, hold on a second, no, I'm angry about this cross in my boundaries. So when they're constantly gaslighting, which is where you see a situation one way and then they're saying, no, it's not like this. It's actually something different. For example, you've placed your sunglasses somewhere and you saw them move it and to the floor and then it got scratched. I don't know why they moved it to the floor. Maybe they wanted to clear the table and that was the nearest location. And you bring up, hey, my sunglasses scratched. I wasn't so happy that you moved it there. And they're like, I didn't move it there. I did not do that. And they can do it with such convincing, straight faces, poker faces, and you start to doubt your own emotions, you doubt your own recollection of events, and it can be really distressing when this happens. I've talked a little bit about it already, but another sign of narcissism is anger, and sometimes it can be that explosive anger outbursts, difficulties regulating their behaviours, and that can be quite frightening or sudden for people, and that invalidation, the emotion invalidation. So this is where your emotions, your needs are dismissed as being either too over the top, don't match the situation, or maybe minimized, you shouldn't feel that way. And I heard a really great analogy for this, that emotional invalidation, it's something that's invisible. Someone's saying it and no one can see it. Like, for example, if someone was hit, you could see a bruise and it can feel more obvious why this is hurtful. But with emotion invalidation, it's like tiny invisible cuts every day. And the impact on your mental health is really significant. That being around chronic invalidation can cause signs of stress, anxiety, depression. It can be really detrimental for your mental health, and that's just your body saying, hey, something's not right here. So if you're experiencing that, it doesn't mean anything's wrong with you. It more means, hey, there's something maybe to look at to get some help for. So if you're worried that you're experiencing a relationship like this and you don't know what to do, you can always seek help from a counsellor, a psychologist, one of the helplines. All over the world, there might be various different types of helplines. In Australia, we've got different ones, and I can pop a link to those in the episode show notes. If you are feeling comfortable or confident to see what you can do, it's important to recognize the difference between someone who has that capacity for change and growth mindset. So they can hear your perspective, they can shift their behavior, things can get better gradually over time, versus being in a situation where maybe that person says, yeah, I get it, but you know consistently nothing's shifting over time and you're chronically not feeling okay. That's where it's important to either get out of the relationship, seek some help, whether it's from, a professional counsellor or a trusted friend or family member that you can talk to. And it's really important to be able to set your own boundaries, know that what you're feeling is valid, and be able to communicate with your partner. So you don't want to settle for less than that when you're dating. And if you're early on in dating, remember that people put their best self at the beginning of the dates. So if you're seeing a lot of these signs early on in the dates, that could be a deal breaker and might be worth moving on and finding one where it naturally is easier, where they have that ability to empathize, where you feel like you can communicate easily with them and you're not being gaslit or criticized or things like that are really harmful and hurtful. Okay, everyone, I hope this was a helpful introduction to some signs and symptoms of if you're dating someone with narcissism, or what you might notice or experience yourself if you're on the receiving end. Remember, if you have any questions or comments or would like to hear a theme or topic on the podcast, feel free to drop me a line in the episode show notes. There's going to be a link. I hope you have a lovely day or night wherever you are.